What's up, amigos? Commander Jaime here. Today we're going to show off a Blue Wave Premium deck profile. This is going to be before the support of Team Dragon's Vanity. This is really just showing off the deck that I was using for the combo video that I released about a month ago. So some of the stuff that we have available right now and what we can just kind of like utilize and see if what could actually help us. And then at the end of the video, I'm actually going to discuss over some things that Blue Wave would actually appreciate, so that way we could actually play competitively and also have a good time playing casually with other decks too, so we're not so far behind, if you know what I mean. So let's get right into it. So for the grade 3 lineup, I'm playing about 9 grade 3s actually. So you can go either way. You can do Anger Boil or you can do Valeos. In my build that I started messing with was really using Anger Boil. There's an interaction between the Stride and, of course, with Anger Boil. And so for those that don't know, is that Anger Boil has a skill when you actually strike with this specific card, your Vanguard actually gets a red text skill. So that way on the second battle that it attacks, you can choose 2 of your rearguards, stand them, and they get +3. And so it helps promote that Tetra Boil turn where you need to get a minimum of 4 battles because this guy actually does a restand. And so just to back up, Blue Wave specializes in restanding strides such as Tetra Boil and then of course Flood Hazard. And so really both strides have the restand skill. So basically when this attacks, you can counter blast 1, flip a copy of itself, and it gets -1 drive check. So it goes to twin drive, and then it gets a red text skill where basically if it sees a 4th battle, on the 4th battle, if it sees a rearguard attack Vanguard, you can discard 1 card, restand it, and again, it will actually attack with twin drive again. And so this is what really Blue Wave specializes compared to like a Davos deck or a Ripples or a Maelstrom deck. And so just keeping that in mind, with the Tetra Boil and Anger Boil combination, it's just the route that I went. If you want to do Valeos, go ahead. Honestly, you'll get a better Flood Hazard turn with Valeos too, because Valeos is a grade 3 that actually, locks the opponent's Vanguard at 11k, which is a really good skill. So either way, you can go either way. So I decided to choose Anger Boil just because it promotes this turn, and it's very low commitment play actually too, so that helps a lot. And so kind of going with this being the core, you want to ride this guy as a main Vanguard. I added grade 3s to kind of like help supplement those turns, or even if worst case scenario, if you ride it, you can get an Excel circle at least. But ultimately, you want to ride Anger Boil, and so the rear guards that are the grade 3s that serve as a rear guard will be like a Riptide, for example. He's just a beater, so he can only attack when it's the 4th battle or more in that turn, but he gets a power up of 20k, so he's a 32k beater, which is really good because after you do your restanding turn, you have this like second Vanguard attack, and if you don't have another rearguard column, he usually gets PG on the second attack, and so you can still put those triggers on that rearguard, which could be Riptide, that can still attack, and so you can still benefit that turn as well. And then with Hydro Hurricane Dragon was something that I wanted to mess with because it has the power to retire, so when it's placed with either Vanguard or rearguard, you can actually just counter blast, choose any unit on your opponent's side, and pop it. It's actually really nice. In Aqua Force, we don't have that many units that can retire. Most of the time, they're locked behind some number of battles, but Hydro Hurricane Dragon, you could just place it and just pop something right away. So it's really nice, actually, because you can just retire something in the main phase rather than in the battle phase, if that makes any sense. One of the nice things you can do is retire basically annoying pestering regards like in the back row, because sometimes like most of the time you can still attack your opponent's front row regards, but you can't really touch the back one, so this helps a lot with popping those annoying ones. Like Mega Colony has a Brownie Jerk, that new Centipede promo, just some other decks that just have annoying grade 1s or even grade 0s that just lurk behind, just chilling and stuff. Now for the grade 2s, Fuevos is an amazing Blue Wave unit. So for those that don't know, on the 3rd time only, you can counter blast, and he gets a +2k for the turn, so he becomes an 11k attacker, and then at the end of the battle, you restand it. So it's an 11k restander on his own. You gotta make sure you have the Blue Wave name in your Vanguard, and it can be used before you even stride. So if you have a grade 2 Vanguard that has the Blue Wave name, so if you wrote him and then just call another copy, or if you have another Blue Wave grade 2, he's already live. So you have early game potential. Ideally, he works really well with the Anger Boil, Tetra Boil turns because you can honestly just attack with him. Then with the combination of the Stride, you can restand him again with that skill, and then you put any triggers onto Fuevos, and then on the third wave, he attacks, restands, attacks again, and boom, your Vanguard can now restand at that point. So it synergizes really well to that attack pattern. Wow, that attack pattern specifically. And you can also just pop him down on Alexandro's turn on first stride or even more, just to kind of like do that first wave with him, and then the Alexandros can be the second wave, and then he can restand on the third and go from there essentially. So he's really flexible, and he's really good in the early game and mid to late game. He's just he's a very good unit. And just to help him along is Tidal Assault. I'm using the original Tidal just because of the attack patterns that I rely on. I wanted to promote that this card can still be good in the mid to late game as well. And so having that minus 5k happen at the end of the battle rather during the battle, if you do attack with like, with the V series title, for example, it just seemed to synergize well. And then I play a grade 1 called Calm Assault that kind of helps pretty much negate that 5k during those battles. And it also beefs up Fuevos, but I'll get into more into that. But honestly, it's just another restander. He's free, and he synergizes well with the Anger Boil restand skill as well. So he becomes a 12k attacker, which can hit Excel and Protect Vanguards on his own too at that point. So it's good. And then, of course, we have Coral Assault. I wanted another unit that was also kind of a beater, just to make sure, after you do your Vanguard restands and you can still apply the triggers. Coral Assault is just another beater. So when you have 4 or more other rested units, you can actually get the plus 15, so you're a beater. And then, of course, he swoops himself into Soul, so you can draw a card. So if you want, you can plop him down, have a blue wave Vanguard, and then call Fuego, so you can do your 4 battles. You can do your 4 battles that turn. And then Coral Assault can just swoop in and draw. Now, you won't necessarily get the 15k unless you committed more units to the board, but it lets you actually get back some advantage, and at the same time you do 4 battles, and then with that, Fuevos is the only one in the front besides your Vanguard that can be attacked, so that helps in that regard too. Now into the grade 1s. I think honestly the grade 1 lineup is the one that I tinkered the most. We have a couple options now, especially in the V series, such as Penguin Soldier or Commissal, and even now the new retrained Wheel Assault as well. So I'll start with Wheel Assault, and honestly, Blue Wave, before V Series, there's no solid grade 1 that you can really benefit as much as like a card like Fuevos and so on. The only card that really came close was Baragios, but most of the time you actually benefit Baragios on a Valeos type deck. And so with the Anger Boil type deck, I kind of like had to look for something else, if that makes sense. So Wheel Assault is the perfect unit to really ride on, and then you have the benefit of counterblasting, call something, draw a card and call something, so you can have some early aggression too with Riptides, Coral Assaults, and you can even call the Hydro Hurricane Dragon to pop something even early on. If you have the spare counterblast, you can do some fun stuff. And what's really nice is that the rearguard skill is where you can swap units. If you don't have enough circles to do a proper restanding turn with either Tetra Boil or Flood Hazard, it's a lot harder with Flood Hazard, and so he makes the Flood Hazard turn a bit better with him, so that way you can make sure you're still benefiting from the drive checks and putting onto rear guards that can still attack after the second Vanguard attack. I can't stress that highly enough, but it just makes that turn much better in that sense. And so with him swapping units all over the place at will, it's really nice, especially if you already have an Excel Circle, which doesn't happen all the time, but if you have one, you can Excel Circle abuse it, basically. So yeah, so going into more of these units first before I get to Orphea and Nikki. So Penguin and Calm Assault. So both of them power up units in different ways. And so Penguin Soldier, you have to rest it to give plus 5k to something in front of it. The early game, it's not that great, but in the mid to late game, once you start striding and you have the Anger Boil skill going off, or even an Alexandros turn, you can restand the Penguin so that it can boost still in that battle phase, and also use this skill to power up in the main phase, if that makes any sense. So, for example, let's say you're doing an Anger Tetra Boil turn, you use Penguin Soldier in the main phase, beef up your Fuevos plus 5, your battle phase now, Fuevos attacks by himself, then your Anger Boil Vanguard combination restands this Penguin in the Fuevos, and now Penguin can actually boost and still have, Fuego still has the 5k power up, in a sense. So you can have that flexibility, and also he can countercharge. Since I don't play the Play-Doh PGs, I don't have another way to countercharge, so Penguin helps with that. Typically, you can get away with 2 counterblasts in moderation. There are times that you may have to use a third counterblast, or if you have to work with 1 counterblast, a flood hazard turn is possible with Penguin Soldier, because flood hazard actually activates at the end of the 4th battle, and so when the 4th battle happens, you can immediately countercharge, and now flood hazard can actually use that counterblast. So it works out in that respect. I wanted to see him just enough, so I play 3. And the same thing with Calm Assault. I want to see just enough, so I play 3 as well. Calm Assault honestly works better in the early game, because if you do have a grade 2 turn that is going to do 4 battles, he's perfect for it. So you can really make some numbers with him. And he doesn't have to be behind a unit. He can be anywhere on board. And you can even call him in the front row to poke as well. So, for example, if your opponent's at grade 1, more than likely they're 8k base or even lower. So you can pop down in one of the front rows and then have a Fuevos on the other side. And you can just, he can provide attack pressure. And then he also power ups Fuevos for the 3rd and 4th wave, which is like pretty awesome, honestly. So that helps in that regard. You can use his skill twice per turn, because he does the 3rd and 4th battle, so Fuevos can just get that 5k for those battles, which are pretty crucial, especially if you need to break a threshold because of a trigger, or just because of a 10k, 15k threshold that you're trying to break. And so it helps with that. If you combine the Penguin and the Calm Assault in the mid to late game, you can power up Fuevos basically 10k for those battles. And because Fuevos gets a power up from Anger Boil, who'll be a 14k plus 10k, makes 24. So now triggers, if they get a trigger on their damage stack, Fuevos can hit it on his own, essentially, which is really good. And so you want to help promote those turns. And honestly, the synergizes really well. And then with Orphea and Nikki, Nikki's really just there, just have the ability to stride. I play 9 grade 3s. I'm kind of already pushing it down. I usually lean to the 11 cards to be able to pitch to stride, essentially. But so far it's working, probably because I'm playing units like Coral Assault, and then of course Whale Assault helps draw the extra card, and I'm playing 6 draw, so it kind of helps with that, being able to ride and stride without losing too much advantage. If it really hurts when you pitch 2 or more cards in Aqua Force, so that helps in that regard. So I still play the 1 Nikki in that regard. Orphea is kind of like my own personal touch. Honestly, Orphea I've been using since years ago with Blue Wave and in the competitive scene. The fact that you can abuse a unit to restem after being powered up by another unit or even triggers is amazing. And just putting her again, especially with units like Riptide and Coral Assault, it's a lot easier to abuse. And then if they have like a V-Series power-up from a trigger, it just makes it nuts. Like the -5k is pretty much negligible when you're using it on a Riptide, or when you just get another trigger, because it's a 10k power-up, So it's really good to abuse that, and then at the same time, you can get like 7 attacks easily with those kinds of turns too. So yeah. Now into the grade 0s. Playing the on Ride Draw 1 starter. It doesn't matter which one. I just like the Draco Kid for the art. You could play the Dagger Master kit from the G era. That's the one that you can counterblast, put into Soul. When your Vanguard attacks 2nd wave or more, you can draw a card, and then if it's the 5th wave or more, it gets crit. It's really good for the Tetra Boil aiming Flood Hazard turns if you're going to do a restanding turn. The only issue that I run into that starter is because it causes a counterblast, and it may be hard to do the Vanguard skill, a Fuego skill, and then a starter skill. So you're already spending 3 counterblasts. And that's assuming you didn't use any counterblast beforehand. So it's not as easy as I like to be. And at the same time, Blue Wave doesn't have a lot of defense, so you don't want to take a lot of damage that early on if it's unnecessary at that point. So that's why I rather use the on-ride draw one. Plus you get to see your grade 3s more than likely, because it's just another card that you can see, right? And so into the trigger lineup, I'm actually playing 6 crit, 6 draw still. So with the premium collection, we got the one that goes into Soul, give plus 10 to the Vanguard. It is for the battle. I wish it was for the turn. So you can either do it on the first Vanguard attack or the second. Most of the time, the second one gets PG. So more than likely, if you want to add some pressure, just do it on the first Vanguard attack. It's also another unit that you can plop down just to get another wave in. He can attack, and then the Vanguard can attack and swoop it in. So it helps with that. Honestly, one of the one of the cool things that I can do is that if you have this guy boosted by a wheel assault, it's a 12k column, so you can attack with that, swap with like a Riptide that was behind the Vanguard, and then now Riptide's in the front, and then when you attack with Vanguard, that trigger swoops in and you draw a card. So you can really you can make some good battles and combinations to make your turn pretty strong actually. So he's still beneficial. And then of course I'm playing the Brutal Trooper. He is the blue wave crit that actually has a really good skill. So basically you can put it onto your deck, shuffle your deck, and then your Vanguard can get the skill that basically on attack second wave or more, it can actually draw a card. And so ideally you want to do it on a restanding Vanguard turn, so that way for every crit trigger that you use, you get a +1 essentially. And it's just another way of actually putting crits into the deck, so you have more crit pressure than just the 6 crit, if that makes sense. I know some Aqua Force players don't like playing the 6 crit and the 6 draw because, like, I really appreciate, the crit pressure of like 8 crit or 7 crit and so far like that, stuff like that. So him being able just to go back into deck is really good for that too. And then of course, it's a piece that you'd rather drive check rather than keep in your hand, and so that way you're more than likely to get combo pieces, which you appreciate more at that point. So anyway, going into the draw triggers, obviously I'm playing the PGs and then 2 additional draw. I just want to up the consistency of the deck. So 6 draw has helped me a lot, and it's helped a lot of Aqua Force players, and even in different builds, so it's not uncommon anymore. And of course I wanted to make room for PG, so I put them in the trigger lineup rather than in the grade 1 lineup. So, and then with the heals, it's just a V series heal trigger, so you can get the power up, the 10k, and then of course you appreciate the 20k shield if you need to use it over a G guard. Honestly, Aqua Force's G guards aren't that great, so sometimes that 20k may actually come up. But it is what it is at that point. But you gotta use it early on to protect a unit like a Fuevos if you really need to, or it's worth actually guarding it. So it helps with that too as well. Now into the strides. Honestly, I'm trying out all the Tetra Boy and the Flood Hazards. You more than likely, if you were going into the competitive scene, I would suggest kind of like a 4-to-2 ratio. 4 Tetra Boil over 2 Flood Hazard that way for the Anger Boil build. If you're doing Valeos, more than likely you're going to do 4 Flood Hazard and 2 Tetra Boil. And then we'll have to see what we get in new support if we get a Tetra unit in the form of a grade 3. So that might change too. But ultimately, you can play with the ratios. I don't think you need the 4 and 4, but I was just messing with it. Just testing to see what could come up, what plays that I can do, and because of the Anger Boil build, I tend to lean on the Tetra Boil turns more often. So so back to with Tetra Boil, again, it's a restanding stride. It's GB2 restricted, so if you're going first stride, you can't do the restanding skill. But because the Anger Boil skill gives that other skill, you can do a first stride with it just to do the Anger Boil skill, which can come up if you're low on Counterblast or you don't have any, and it may be a better play. That's possible. Otherwise, you can fall back into an Alexandro's turn. Or if you can do a Flood Hazard turn, that is always an option. The only problem with Flood Hazard is that you will minus a lot if you do it first stride, unless you got something to compensate for it. And that could be in the form of the Brutal Trooper, which is the crit trigger, or if you drive check a draw trigger. And that's really the advantage you can gain during your battles in that form to help negate that huge cost on first stride if you do Flood Hazard. And so for those that don't know, Flood Hazard basically has the restanding skill where if a blue wave unit attacked any unit at the end of the 4th battle, you can Counterblast, Persona Flip, and restand this by discarding 2 cards. And that discard 2 is no matter what. It's not GB restricted, so you can do it first stride. But because it also gets a minus drive 3 check, so it becomes basically the first attack goes 3 drive checks, and then it goes to 0. So you're getting no advantage on the second attack, and so discarding 2 does hurt. And at the same time, you have to commit a little more to actually make this turn happen, because you have to hit 4th battles at that point. And if you stride this card onto Anger Boil, you're not going to get the restanding skill from Anger Boil, so you do have to pretty much plug down another unit to get to that 4th battle happening. And basically, its GB3 skill at the bottom is really what it's kind of like break even. So GB3, it gets an additional drive check for the turn, and then all of your blue wave units in the front row get plus 2k. So if you're doing this when your GB3 is live in your main phase, then you actually break even. You have a quad check followed by a 1 check. So you see 5 drive checks in total. And if you do it in the first or second battle, you can put those 4 drive checks on a restanding unit. It's like a Fuego, so he can actually utilize it in the 3rd wave or the 4th wave. And then, of course, you just restand and go from there. And honestly, even Aqua Forest decks that don't play a blue wave, you can utilize the GB3 skill because it's non-blue wave restricted. The restanding skills are blue wave heart restricted, but the GB3 skill of getting the additional drive check is not. So you can play it in Ripples, you can play it in Thabas or any other Aqua Force build like Maelstrom. It's one of those cards that we've seen from time to time to be teched as a one-off, just in case of scenarios, but quad check might be helpful if you can't do your turn, but ultimately, I think with the introduction of some of these other cards like Alexandros and Veleos, it's not the case most of the time. And again, Alexandros is an amazing stride. So 2nd wave or 3rd wave, restand up to 2 units. Normally, you want to restand 2 units in the front row, but with this deck, you can get away with 1 column and restand a booster instead, like the Penguin Soldier with the Fuevos play. If you don't want to do a heavy commitment play on the first stride, so that's an option. And then, of course, it just gets plus 5k for every card in the G zone. So over time, it's just going to be a big beater. And big beaters that you can use is like Fuevos because it's a restanding skill. Restanding rear guards that you can abuse with. And then, of course, you got Riptide and Coral Assault just to be bigger beefy units on top of that. Lambros is Lambros too. He doesn't cause a counterblast where Alexandros does, but he does require to be the 4th attack himself or more. And so if you're low on counterblast and that's the play, Lambros is there for that option mainly. Other than that, you might go into, honestly, you're either going to Alexandros, Anger Boy, or Flood Hazard. Those usually are your key strides. So Lambros is kind of there just to help out in those situations. And then you got Veleos, which is the premium collection strat, which can come up. I wish he had the blue wave name, because you can do some plays where if you're not on the blue wave heart at that point, that would be really cool. But he doesn't. I don't know why Bushy did that. But anyway, on attack on blast 1, call up to 2 cards for every face up in the G zone, and for each card you call, you draw a card. So it helps provide more pressure and also get back advantage at the same time. So it's not a huge loss at that point. And then if you're basically GBT or more, or if you have 2 cards face up in the G zone when he does a skill, you lock your opponent at 11k as well. So you can really abuse that as well. And then, of course, you got the Megiddo. If you need to ultimate strike, it is there for you. And if you have an Excel circle, it's even better at that point. But more than time, you're going to use Tetra Boil, Flood Hazard, or even an Alexandros to really finish off your game. So in that respect. Lastly, we have the G guards. I play 2 Ice Barriers, 1 Ionis, and 1 Gaphilia. Gaphilia is the one that if you're going to do Alexandros, you can flip her so that way you have the counter charge available to you. It's really nice because then you can dictate what turn you can go into if you need to, because Tetra Boil and Flood Hazard can work with GB2, GB3, just like that. It's not like Alexandros where if you use Gaphilia to flip itself down to counter charge or unlock something, Alexandros then loses 5k. It's a 5k power up to all the other rearguards that still have to attack that turn. So being able to still use a Tetra Boil or your Flood Hazard and still just counter charge that way is really nice. So honestly, 1 is just enough for this deck. There's only so much room, and like I said, you can reduce the Flood Hazard or the Tetra Boil depending on what you do for the grade 3, and you can make some room for more G guards, or you can make room from other strides. There's plenty of other Aqua Force strides you can play too, or even G guards. So just play around with it and see what you guys like. Ice Barrier is good for the 1st or the 4th more. It's just the biggest shield we got on top of Ionis. Ionis is the bigger shield if we have a field. And he flips a G guard too. So you can flip Gaphilia if you want, and then you can just like counter charge to negate the cost for the next turn. And it's just like I said, if you have the field, you get plus 5k for every rear guard, and they get the resist skill. So if they try to hit the rear guard or kill it in the battle phase, the unit is saved essentially. So yep. So that was the deck profile, guys. So a couple of things that I wanted to add to this is that We still don't even know what Baragios does. We've seen from the show what he does, but from the skill perspective, actually the reveal is tonight from this recording. So we get to find out. And honestly, we need a couple of things. So for the grade 1 lineup, if Yorgos or Baragios is a grade 1 in the V series, actually can provide some value to the Blue Wave deck in general, or even in premium that we can utilize, it'll be great. It'll be the 10k shield, it'll be 8k base, and it's just a better it's better value to use those kinds of cards rather than still rely on the G era cards, because they become outdated in power creep and of course shield and attack and all that kind of stuff. So that would be pretty much well appreciated. You can do some plays with Baragios if we did get a grade 3 blue wave with the Excel gift marker. Because Baragios is kind of like a restander, but he was more meant to be a restanding booster. But if you plop him on an Excel circle, he's a 12k, and so he can be utilized as a 12k restander, like poking unit kind of thing. And so you can do stuff with that with the current Baragios in the G era. But I think, but like I said, that usually would work if we get a grade 3 blue wave with the Excel gift marker. That would be very much appreciated. You can ride it, you can an Excel circle, you can do Excel 2 to draw a card, then stride, and you can do your flood hazard turn. You can do a flood hazard turn a lot easier because of the Excel 2 gift marker. You draw a card, you already negate one card from his discard cost. And if you have a brutal trooper or you drive check a draw trigger, you break even. I mean, there is that commitment play that you still have to do, but since if you do first strike, then you can Ionis next turn, get a bigger shield value if you need it for that with the respect of G Guardian. Fuevos is still a good card. The retrain, man, they really plowed on him. The retrain doesn't even care about blue wave in the name. It only cares if you're grade 3 attacked. It specifically said grade 3. It didn't say grade 3 or greater. So it already gets locked out of the stride turns. And it restands to depending if the power of the opponent's Vanguard is different. And that is something that you can't easily control unless we get a grade 3 blue wave with the gift marker that can do that on the spot on place or something. Then we can do it on, or even in the grade 3 turn, you can do that and still use it. But honestly, the OG Fuevos is still better, at least with the premium deck in that regard. And so, I don't know if we're going to get another grade 2. We saw Galeos, and Galeos had the same restriction, which really sucks. Honestly, he's the better unit, I think, because he's a restander that kind of gives himself power too at the same time. So that's always nice. Plus, if you're playing premium, you're still going to use the OG Fuevos over the new one. And you can't have multiple copies of the same card because they have the same name. So you would rather have like another Blue Wave 2, Blue Wave grade 2 that has a different name. So you can have more grade 2s that have Blue Wave in the name. Another thing that we could actually need is a starter. I think we saw Costi in this show. As long as that starter is like an on-ride draw one and it has Blue Wave in the name, you can actually use Valeos a lot easier. Valeos, again, he requires a Soul Blast 1 of a Blue Wave unit to actually restrict an 11k lock on your opponent's Vanguard. So that would be appreciated if the starter was a Blue Wave unit. It makes that a lot easier, so you don't have to rely on writing a grade 2 or a grade 1 that has a Blue Wave unit, essentially. And your first strike turn is just a lot stronger with a Flood Hazard, because at that point, a Flood Hazard turn for every attack you have, it's either a damage or a card, really. Which is really cool, and it takes away from that damage check, the fear factor of a trigger, basically. And now you're exposed, and you kind of fall behind and lose the game at that point. But anyway, I've been talking too much. So those are a couple of things that honestly I would appreciate from the new set. Like I said, there's still cards that still need to be revealed. Like Baragios is going to be revealed tonight of this recording, and then of course we'll see what happens if we do actually get a grade 3 that has a Blue Wave name and has the gift marker. So, all right, guys. So that's it. Again, this is just something that I was messing with, and I showed up in the combo video about a month ago. So it's going to improve. And see you guys next set. All right. Signing out. Bye.